John Douglas interviewed 36 serial killers. Then his own brain turned against him. December 1983, a hotel room in Seattle. 37 years old, 6 years sitting face to face with Manson, Bundy, Gacy, Kemper. He had built the system for understanding the most dangerous predators in American history. He was, by every institutional measure, the most effective criminal profiling agent the FBI had ever produced. He collapsed alone on the floor, unconscious. Viral encephalitis, catastrophic inflammation of the brain. His doctors told his wife Anne he might not survive, and if he did survive, he might not be John Douglas anymore. The man who built the science of hunting killers was about to find out what 6 years of that science had cost him. But who was the man who built this? And how does someone get into rooms with these people in the first place? Douglas joined the FBI in 1970. Psychology degree. Not a conventional recruit. Athletic, competitive, driven by instinct as much as procedure. He came to Quantico at a moment when the Bureau had zero framework for understanding murder psychology. Investigators responded to what killers did. The idea that you could anticipate a killer by understanding his psychology had no institutional language yet. Then Douglas met Special Agent Robert Ressler, another man who believed the answer lay inside the killer's head. 1977, Criminal Personality Research Project. No budget, no official approval. On their own time, between speaking engagements, they drove to wherever the prisons were. The concept had never been systematically attempted. Request interviews with convicted serial killers and ask them directly, how did you choose your victims? What were you thinking? What did you feel? In 3 years, they interviewed 36 convicted serial homicide offenders. Manson, Bundy, Gacy, Kemper, son of Sam. Not interrogations, psychiatric conversations, structured, clinical, designed to document the psychology behind the violence. Douglas and Ressler were building the first map of predatory psychology the FBI had ever possessed.
Charles Manson was first.
Vacaville, 1977. Douglas entered expecting madness. What he found was a man of considerable social intelligence, hyper-aware, manipulative, skilled at reading the interviewer and working against him. Manson spent 40 minutes trying to turn the conversation, probing for personal information, establishing dominance through information asymmetry. Douglas recognized the technique and redirected. What he documented was not madness. It was strategic social control, applied without conscience and without limit. Ted Bundy was different in surface presentation. Educated, articulate, legally trained, but identical at the structural level. He spoke about his crimes in the third person. He constructed a version of himself that served his interests while simultaneously believing it. What made Bundy dangerous was not his intelligence. It was that the intelligence was completely unanchored from moral reality. It had no bottom. What those 36 interviews produced changed how every murder investigation in the world would be conducted. Here is the core of it: organized versus disorganized. An organized killer plans in advance, selects victims strategically, controls the crime scene, transports the body, disposes of it deliberately. A disorganized killer acts impulsively, leaves the scene chaotic, often knows the victim, lives close to where the crime occurred. These are not moral categories. They are behavioral fingerprints, information encoded in the crime scene itself that points toward the psychology that generated it. Before Douglas and Ressler, investigators had intuition. After them, a reproducible science. Among all 36, one was different in kind. Edmund Kemper. 8 murders, including his own mother. IQ of 145. A level of clinical self-awareness Douglas described as extraordinary. Kemper did not manage his narrative or perform for Douglas. He explained himself. He described the psychology of his crimes with a precision that matched the clinical literature. In some cases, anticipated it. He told Douglas what he had wanted from his victims, what the experience felt like, what the escalation looked like from the inside. During a session that ran long, Kemper offered to call the prison guards when Douglas was ready to leave. He had access to the staff phone. He made the call. He returned to the table. And Douglas understood in that moment. The line between inmate and institution was more permeable than it appeared. Kemper was entirely at ease. Douglas was the one learning the rules. 6 years of this, 18-hour days, Atlanta child murders, constant flights, poor sleep. He was absorbing the most concentrated record of human predation ever assembled. There is a concept in trauma psychology called vicarious traumatization, first documented by researcher Charles Figley, later expanded by Lori Perlman. The gradual accumulation of trauma symptoms in professionals who work closely with traumatic material, not because they experienced it directly, because sustained engagement with others' trauma alters the helper's own internal belief systems. This is not weakness, it is neurology. A 2013 study published in JAMA Psychiatry found structural differences in the brains of individuals with prolonged exposure to extreme stress, specifically in regions governing emotional regulation and threat processing. The architecture of the brain changes under sustained pressure. That is not a metaphor. That is documented biology. The FBI had no protocol for this in 1983. No psychological monitoring, no rotation schedules, no understanding that the human mind doing this work was itself a tool that required maintenance. The assumption was that professionalism was insulation. It was not. December 1983, Seattle hotel room. Running on fumes. Sustained exhaustion he had learned to normalize because the work required it. He did not wake up. Viral encephalitis, severe brain inflammation, coma. His wife flew immediately. When she arrived, he was unconscious, and the medical team offered no clear prognosis. His FBI supervisor called Ann and said, "We need to know if he's going to make it, because we need to plan around the investigation." He woke up, could talk, remembered his wife's name, remembered the work. The neurological danger of viral encephalitis is specific. The inflammation targets cognitive function, motor control, memory, and personality. The brain that emerges is not always the same brain that went in. Some patients recover full physical function, but lose significant portions of long-term memory. Others recover memory, but lose higher-order reasoning. The doctors were explicit. Your life must change. The schedule, the caseload, the accumulation of darkness, it cannot continue without permanent consequences. He returned to work early, found it was different. He tired more quickly. He was more emotionally reactive. Certain photographs hit differently. The professional insulation that had functioned for 6 years was thinner. He later described this period as the first time he understood, not theoretically but viscerally, what the work actually cost. He had spent 6 years in rooms with the most predatory people in documented history. His body had been keeping a record the entire time. In Seattle, it presented the bill. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. Friedrich Nietzsche. Douglas cites this as operational reality, not metaphor. The specific danger is what he calls over-identification, the gradual erosion of psychological distance between the investigator and the material. To profile a killer, you must inhabit his perspective, understand the logic of the selection, the emotional satisfaction of the control. Done with precision and separation, this produces insight. Done continuously without monitoring, it begins to alter your own emotional baseline, your own capacity to feel the weight of what you are examining. Douglas maintained the line for 6 years before Seattle. In Seattle, the line moved. He returned to active duty, retired 1995. In the years after Seattle, he was quieter about the volume of work he took on, more deliberate. The collapse had changed something in his relationship to the job, not his commitment to it, but his understanding of what it cost to do it right. Green River Killer Case provided a profile that, when Gary Ridgway was arrested in 2001, matched the actual offender with documented accuracy across multiple behavioral dimensions. The science worked. Unabomber consultation. He trained a generation of FBI investigators in the methodology built from those original 36 interviews. He also built what had not existed before: structured psychological monitoring for agents doing this work, rotation schedules, mandatory consultation, recognition that this work, done without safeguards, produces occupational damage. The FBI's assumption that professionalism was insulation was incorrect. Douglas's collapse is the reason agents doing this work now have protocols. 1995. Mindhunter published. #1 bestseller. The first account from the builder of the system, of what it cost. Not institutional, human. In the epilogue, he poses the question he has asked most: how do you do this work without losing yourself? His answer is not a technique. It is not a protocol. It is a description of a line, a maintained, actively defended boundary between understanding a predator's psychology and inhabiting it, between comprehending the logic of violence and accepting it as normal. The line, he argues, is maintained by non-negotiable engagement with the world outside the work. Family, the ordinary, the mundane, not as escape, as counterweight, as proof that the world the killers destroyed still exists. He is 80 years old. He still consults. The line still holds. If this video gave you something the true crime genre usually doesn't, not just what happened, but what it cost to understand it, that is exactly what CurioMind is built to produce. Subscribe. Every week we go one level deeper into the documented psychology behind the most dangerous cases in history. Leave a comment. Do you think it's possible to do this work without the line eventually moving? Douglas survived. Not everyone does. I read every comment. Next week on CurioMind, the FBI profile that caught the Green River Killer. What a perfect profile actually looks like, and why it almost never happens.